The bell rang, signaling the end of another long day at Ridgewood High, but for one 16-year-old boy, the real challenge was just beginning. He stood by his locker, carefully stacking his history textbook, notebook, and a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird into his backpack. Everything had to be neat, organized, predictable. It was the only part of his day he could control. He'd only been at this school for 3 months, ever since his family moved from Atlanta after his mom got transferred for work. Back home, he knew the rhythm of the hallways, the teachers who'd nod when he walked by, the friends who'd save him a seat at lunch. Here, everything felt off-kilter. The students spoke faster, dressed flashier, and seemed to size you up the second you stepped onto campus. He wasn't loud. He didn't wear flashy sneakers or blast music from his phone. He liked quiet corners, good grades, and staying out of trouble. But somehow that made him a target. It started small, whispers in the hallway, a snicker when he answered a question in class, someone accidentally bumping into him hard enough to knock his books out of his hands. At first he told himself it was just teenage stuff. Maybe they were testing him, seeing if he'd crack. He kept his head down, walked faster, avoided eye contact. But then came Tyler. Tyler wasn't just another student. He was the kind of kid who walked like he owned the school, broad-shouldered, always in a Letterman jacket even when it was too warm, with a smirk that never quite left his face. He played on the football team, had a car his parents bought him for his birthday, and seemed to have a group of followers who laughed at everything he said, even when it wasn't funny. Teachers gave him second chances. Coaches called him a leader. But the boy by the locker knew better. The first real confrontation happened near the gym after PE class. The boy was tying his shoes when Tyler and 2 of his friends blocked the exit. "Hey, bookworm," Tyler said, voice dripping with fake friendliness. "You always talk like that." "Like you swallowed a dictionary?" His friends chuckled. The boy just stood up, brushed off his jeans, and tried to walk past. But Tyler stepped in front of him. "Where are you going?" "We're just getting to know each other." He didn't respond. He'd learned early that talking back only made it worse, so he stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. That silence seemed to annoy Tyler even more. "Man, you act like you're better than us," Tyler sneered. "You think just 'cause you read books and wear your shirt tucked in, you're special?" One of the friends snatched the boy's water bottle and tossed it across the hallway. The boy didn't chase it. He just kept walking, heart pounding, face burning. After that, it became a routine. Every day brought a new humiliation. In the cafeteria, Tyler would accidentally spill his tray near the boy's table, then laugh as food splattered across his notebook. In the hallway, a shove from behind when no teacher was looking. Once, Tyler even mimicked the way he spoke in front of a group of girls, exaggerating his careful diction until they giggled. The boy never reacted, not because he wasn't angry, he was deeply, but because he'd seen what happened to kids who fought back. They got labeled troublemakers, suspended, sometimes even expelled, and his mom worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. He couldn't add to her stress. Still, he tried to find small victories. He aced his chemistry quiz. He finished his English essay 2 days early. He even joined the school's debate club, though he only spoke during practice, never in front of an audience. These were his secret wins, tiny sparks of pride in a day full of shadows. But the worst part wasn't the shoves or the jokes. It was the feeling of being invisible in a crowd. Teachers saw him as the quiet one, classmates as the weird new kid. No one asked how he was doing. No one noticed when he stopped raising his hand in class or started eating lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. He began to wonder if maybe Tyler was right. Maybe he didn't belong here. One afternoon, things took a darker turn. He was walking to his bus stop, earbuds in, listening to a podcast about space exploration, his favorite escape, when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, and there was Tyler, alone this time, leaning against a brick wall near the bike racks. "Taking the bus like a baby?" Tyler said, pushing off the wall and stepping closer. "Thought you were too good for that." The boy didn't answer. He just kept walking, faster now. "Hey," Tyler called after him. "I'm talking to you." He stopped. Not because he wanted to, but because his legs felt heavy, like they'd decided on their own to obey. Tyler caught up in 2 long strides. "You've been talking to Lila, huh?" Tyler's voice dropped, low and dangerous. The boy blinked. Lila, he barely knew her. They'd shared a lab table in biology once. She'd asked to borrow a pencil. That was it. "I haven't talked to her," he said quietly. "Don't lie to me," Tyler snapped. stepping so close their shoulders almost touched. "I saw you two yesterday after class, smiling like your best friends." "We weren't smiling," the boy said, voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "She just asked about the homework." Tyler's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm stupid?" "You think I don't see what you're doing? Trying to move in on my girl the second I break up with her?" "I didn't even know you two broke up," the boy said honestly. That seemed to make Tyler angrier. "You're all the same," he muttered, more to himself than to the boy. "Act all innocent, but you're scheming underneath." Before the boy could respond, Tyler shoved him hard. He stumbled backward, arms flailing, and crashed into the side of a parked car. His head snapped back and he tasted blood. His lip was split. His backpack slid off his shoulder and hit the ground with a thud. Tyler loomed over him, breathing heavily. "Next time you talk to her or even look at her, I'll make sure you regret it. You hear me?" The boy nodded, not trusting his voice. "Good." Tyler straightened his jacket, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then walked off, whistling like nothing had happened. The boy stayed on the ground for a full minute, wiping blood from his lip with the back of his hand. His heart hammered like a drum. He wanted to cry, but he wouldn't. Not here, not where someone might see. Slowly, he gathered his things, checked to make sure his phone wasn't cracked, and walked to the bus stop. That night, he didn't tell his mom. He washed his face, put ice on his lip, and did his homework like nothing happened. But as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he replayed the moment over and over. The shove, the blood, the look in Tyler's eyes, not just anger, but something colder. Something that said, "I can do whatever I want to you and no one will stop me." For the first time, he wondered if staying quiet was really the right choice. Maybe silence wasn't strength. It was surrender. The next morning, he walked into school with his head a little higher. Not defiant, not loud, just present. He made eye contact with the librarian when he returned a book. He said good morning to the janitor mopping the science wing. Small things, but they mattered. He was reminding himself and the world that he was here. He existed. And he wasn't going to disappear, but Tyler was waiting. At lunch, the boy sat alone in the library as usual, reading a novel. He thought he was safe. Then the door creaked open. Tyler walked in, followed by two of his friends. The librarian looked up from her desk, but Tyler gave her a charming smile. "Just returning a book, Ms. Green." She nodded and went back to her computer. Tyler didn't go to the shelves. He walked straight to the boy's table. Without a word, he grabbed the boy's lunch tray, apple, sandwich, juice box, and dumped it into the nearest trash can. Then he picked up the boy's history textbook and tossed it onto the floor. "Oops," Tyler said, not sounding sorry at all. "Clumsy me," one of his friends laughed. The other just watched, arms crossed. The boy didn't move. He kept his eyes on the page, though the words blurred. His hands were clenched under the table, nails digging into his palms. Tyler leaned down, voice low so only the boy could hear. "You told anyone about yesterday?" "Huh? You go crying to your mama?" The boy shook his head. "Good," Tyler said. "Because if you do, it'll be way worse next time." He straightened up, gave the boy one last smirk, and walked out with his friends. The librarian hadn't seen a thing. That afternoon, in English class, the teacher asked for volunteers to read aloud from To Kill a Mockingbird. The boy usually stayed silent, but today something shifted. When no one raised their hand, he slowly lifted his. The teacher looked surprised but nodded. "All right, go ahead." His voice was quiet at first, but as he read Atticus Finch's speech about walking in someone else's shoes, it grew stronger, clearer. For a few minutes, he wasn't the target. He wasn't the quiet new kid. He was just a voice sharing something true. After class, a girl he barely knew, a quiet girl who always sat in the back, handed him a note. It said, "You read really well. Don't let them make you stop." He folded the note and put it in his pocket. It wasn't much, but it was something. That evening, as he walked home, he passed a group of kids playing basketball at the park. One of them waved. He didn't know them, but he waved back. Small connections, tiny threads of belonging, but the fear was still there, coiled in his chest like a snake, because he knew Tyler wasn't done. And deep down, he knew he couldn't keep pretending this wasn't happening. Something had to change. He just didn't know what yet. Later that night, while his mom was on a work call in the other room, he pulled out his phone. He opened the camera roll and stared at the photo his cousin had sent him that morning. Him as a little kid, grinning on his first day of school, backpack bigger than his body. His mom had written on the back of the real photo, "My brave boy." He wasn't sure he felt brave now. But maybe bravery wasn't about not being afraid. Maybe it was about doing what's right even when you are. He took a deep breath, opened a new document on his laptop, and typed 3 words: seen and heard. He didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in weeks he felt like he was taking back control, and that was enough, for now. Rain tapped against the classroom windows like impatient fingers. It was one of those gray afternoons where the sky seemed to press down on the whole town, heavy and slow. The boy sat at his usual desk near the back, pretending to review his math homework, but his mind kept drifting back to the note he'd tucked into his notebook that morning. The one that said, "You read really well. Don't let them make you stop." It was small, almost silly, but it had stayed with him all day like a warm stone in his pocket. He hadn't slept much the night before. After typing those 3 words, seen and heard, into a blank document, he'd stared at the screen for nearly an hour, wondering if he was being foolish. What could a blog do? Words on a screen couldn't stop a shove in the hallway or a sneer in the cafeteria. But then again, maybe they could. Maybe if enough people saw what was really happening, someone would finally care. He hadn't posted anything yet. He wasn't ready. But just the idea of it, of speaking without shouting, of being heard without begging, gave him a strange kind of calm. That calm didn't last long. By 3rd period, the rumors were already swirling. Someone had filmed something near the bike racks yesterday. A video was going around. People were whispering in hushed, excited tones, glancing toward the back hallways like they expected fireworks. He didn't know what they were talking about until lunch. He was in the library again, eating a peanut butter sandwich his mom had packed, when a girl he recognized from chemistry slid into the seat across from him. She didn't say anything at first, just handed him her phone. On the screen, a shaky video played. There he was, back against the car, eyes wide, lip already bleeding. And there was Tyler, chest puffed out, voice sharp even through the phone's tinny speaker. "Next time you talk to her or even look at her, I'll make sure you regret it." The camera panned slightly, catching the rain starting to fall, the empty hallway, the way his hands trembled as he pushed himself up. The video ended. The girl took her phone back, her expression unreadable. "Everyone's seen it," she said quietly. "It's all over Instagram, even teachers are talking about it." His stomach dropped. He hadn't known anyone was watching. He'd thought he was alone. Now the whole school knew he'd been shoved, that he'd bled, that he'd stood there and taken it. Humiliation burned through him hotter than anger. He wanted to disappear, to rewind time and fight back, scream, run. Anything but look so small on that screen. But then something else flickered inside him. Not shame. Not this time. Clarity. Because the video didn't lie. It showed exactly what happened. No exaggeration. No, boys will be boys. Just the truth. One kid using his size and his reputation to hurt someone smaller. He finished his sandwich in silence. The girl didn't stay long. She just nodded once like she understood and left. By the time the final bell rang, the video had over 2,000 views. He walked home slowly, hood up against the drizzle, bracing himself for what came next. He didn't have to wait long. His mom was waiting by the door when he got home, arms crossed, eyes red-rimmed but sharp. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She just held up her phone. "Is this you?" she asked, voice low. He nodded. She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. Then she pulled him into a hug so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "I didn't want to worry you," he said, voice muffled against her shoulder. "You've got so much on your plate already." She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. Her thumb brushed over the scab on his lip. "Baby, your safety is my plate. Always." That night, she called the school. She spoke to the principal, the vice principal, even the district office. She demanded a meeting. She asked for Tyler's disciplinary record. She insisted on a formal investigation. The boy sat at the kitchen table, listening to her voice, firm, steady, unwavering, and felt something shift inside him. He wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, the atmosphere at school was different. People looked at him differently. Some avoided his gaze. Others gave him small nods of respect. A few even muttered, "Sorry that happened." It wasn't an apology from the school, but it was something. Tyler didn't show up for first period. By lunch, he still hadn't appeared. Rumor had it his parents pulled him out for a family matter. The boy almost believed it until he saw him. It was after school near the bus loop. Tyler was leaning against a fence talking to two of his usual friends, but his usual swagger was gone. His shoulders were hunched, his voice low. When he spotted the boy, his expression darkened. He said something to his friends, then started walking toward him. The boy's pulse jumped, but he didn't run. He stood his ground. Tyler stopped a few feet away. "You told your mom," he said, not as a question but an accusation. "I didn't post the video," the boy said evenly. "I didn't even know it existed." "Yeah, right," Tyler scoffed. "And now my dad's getting calls from the superintendent. My coach is pissed. All because you couldn't just take it like a man." "Taking a beating isn't being a man," the boy said. "It's just getting hurt." Tyler's jaw tightened. For a second, the boy thought he might swing. But then, Tyler glanced around, saw a teacher walking nearby, saw a group of students waiting for the bus, and backed off. "This isn't over," he muttered. But the threat sounded hollow this time, like he wasn't sure he believed it himself. That afternoon, the boy stayed late to talk to Mr. Ellis, the history teacher who also ran the school's Cultural Awareness Club. Mr. Ellis was a tall man with a calm voice and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He'd served in the military years ago, but now he taught with a quiet intensity that made even the rowdiest kids listen. He'd seen the video too. "You okay?" Mr. Ellis asked, leaning against his desk after the last student left. The boy shrugged. "I've been better." Mr. Ellis nodded. "You know, silence can be powerful, but sometimes it lets the wrong people write the story." The boy looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Mr. Ellis said, crossing his arms, "you've got a voice, you're smart, you pay attention, and right now, people are listening, even if they don't want to. Don't waste that." "I don't want to start drama," the boy said quickly. "I just want it to stop." "Stopping it is the point," Mr. Ellis said gently. "But you don't have to do it alone. And you don't have to do it with fists. Words can be weapons too, if you aim them right." The boy thought about that all the way home. That night, he sat at his desk again, the laptop glowing in the dark room. He opened the document titled Seen and Heard. This time, he didn't hesitate. He wrote about the first time Tyler mocked his voice in class. He wrote about the lunch tray dumped in the trash. He wrote about the shove against the car, the blood on his lip, the fear that followed him home. But he didn't just write about himself. He wrote about the girl who cried in the bathroom after someone called her ugly for weeks. He wrote about the kid who got tripped in the hallway every Monday because he wore glasses. He wrote about the new student from another country who ate lunch alone because no one would sit with him. He didn't use names. He didn't accuse. He just told the truth, clear, simple, and human. When he hit publish, his hands were shaking. But his heart felt lighter than it had in months. Within an hour, the blog had 50 views, then 100, then 300. Comments started rolling in, not from trolls, but from students. "This happened to me too. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying this." One anonymous message read, "Tyler did the same thing to me last year. I never told anyone. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you." The boy read that one twice, then he saved it. The next day at school, the mood had shifted again. Teachers seemed more alert, watching the hallways with sharper eyes. A group of students gathered near the bulletin board, whispering, not about the video this time, but about the blog. At lunch, instead of going to the library, the boy sat at an empty table near the window. He didn't expect anyone to join him, but then a boy from his biology class slid into the seat across from him. "Hey," he said, unwrapping a granola bar. You write that blog? The boy nodded, bracing for mockery. The other boy just nodded back. My little brother's getting picked on at middle school. I showed him your post. He said it made him feel less alone. They didn't talk much after that. But they sat together, and that was enough. By the end of the week, the principal called an emergency staff meeting. Parents were calling. Local news outlets had picked up the story, not just about the video, but about the pattern of bullying the blog had exposed. One reporter even interviewed a school counselor off the record, who admitted that Tyler had been written up 3 times before, but nothing ever stuck. His parents always got him out of it, the counselor reportedly said. The boy's mom went to the school board meeting that Thursday night. She wore her best blouse and carried a folder full of printed blog posts, screenshots of messages from other students, and a timeline of every incident her son had endured. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just laid out the facts one by one, like pieces of a puzzle that finally made sense. Afterward, a woman approached her in the parking lot. My daughter's been scared to come to school for months, she said, voice breaking. Thank you for giving her a voice. Back at home, the boy scrolled through the blog comments again. One stood out. If you ever start a club or a group, I'll join. We need to look out for each other. He thought about that. The next day, he printed out a few flyers, simple, black and white, and taped them to the bulletin boards near the main office and the cafeteria. It just said seen and heard, a student-led space to share, support, and speak up. First meeting. Thursday after school. Room 214, all are welcome. He didn't know if anyone would come, but on Thursday, 7 students showed up. They sat in a circle, quiet at first. Then one girl spoke about how she'd been called stupid every day for a month because she stuttered when she was nervous. A boy talked about being shoved into lockers because he liked art more than sports. Another student said he'd stopped raising his hand in class because every time he did, someone would mimic him behind his back. No one interrupted. No one laughed. They just listened. The boy didn't say much that first meeting. He mostly took notes. But when it was over, a quiet kid with glasses handed him a folded piece of paper. On it, he'd written, "You're not alone either." That night, the boy updated the blog again. This time, he wrote about the meeting. Not the details, just the feeling. The relief in the room. The way people sat up straighter when they realized they weren't the only ones. He ended with a simple line. We're stronger together. The next morning, Tyler was back at school. He walked the halls like a ghost, shoulders slumped, eyes down, no entourage. When he passed the boy in the hallway, he didn't smirk, didn't say a word, just kept walking. But the boy noticed something else. Tyler wasn't just avoiding him, he was avoiding everyone. At lunch, he sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria, picking at his food. His usual friends were at their old table laughing, but they didn't invite him over. When he tried to join them, one of them shook his head and pointed to an empty seat elsewhere. It wasn't justice. Not really. But it was consequence. And for the first time, the boy realized that bullies don't just hurt their victims, they isolate themselves too. Because fear might win for a while, but it doesn't build anything real. Not friendship, not respect, not trust. That afternoon, Mr. Ellis pulled him aside after class. You've started something important, he said. Don't stop now, the boy nodded. I won't. He walked out of school that day with his head high, not because he'd won, but because he'd finally stopped hiding. And somewhere inside him, a quiet fire had been lit, not of anger, but of purpose. He didn't know what came next. But for the first time, he was ready to find out. The blog didn't just grow, it spread like wildfire. What started as a quiet corner of the internet where one kid poured out his truth became something bigger than anyone expected. Students from other grades, even other schools, began sharing their own stories. Some wrote about being mocked for their clothes, their accents, their religion, or the way they walked. Others talked about being ignored, excluded, or laughed at for things they couldn't control, like needing extra help in class or having parents who worked night shifts and couldn't afford brand-name shoes. The boy didn't reply to every message, but he read them all. Late at night, with his bedroom door cracked and the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs, he'd scroll through submissions, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, choosing which ones to post. He never used real names. He changed small details to protect people. But the emotions, the fear, the loneliness, the quiet hope, those stayed exactly as they were. Because that was the point, to show that pain wasn't unique, and neither was the wish to be seen. Then came the local news. It started with a parent, a mom whose daughter had been too scared to go to school for weeks after someone posted a cruel meme about her online. She saw the blog, recognized her daughter's story in one of the anonymous posts, and reached out to a reporter she knew from church. Within days, a short segment aired on the evening news. Students speak out against bullying at Ridgewood High. They didn't show the boy's face. They used voice distortion and shadows in the footage. But they quoted lines from the blog. They interviewed teachers who admitted the problem had been ignored for too long. And they showed clips of students, faces blurred, saying things like, "I finally feel like someone's listening." Overnight, the blog got thousands of new visitors. Comments poured in from across the state. A retired teacher wrote, "I wish we'd had something like this when I was teaching." A college student shared how she'd dropped out of high school because of relentless teasing and said reading the blog made her feel less ashamed. At school, everything changed. Teachers started paying attention in the hallways. Lunch monitors walked slower, watching for signs of trouble. Even the janitor, a quiet man who rarely spoke, gave the boy a small nod one morning and said, "Keep going." But not everyone was happy. Tyler's parents were furious. They showed up at the next school board meeting in matching blazers, holding folders of their own. They claimed the blog was defamatory, that it painted their son as a monster without proof. They demanded the school shut it down. They even threatened legal action. The principal looked uncomfortable. He'd always been the kind of administrator who preferred calm over truth, order over justice. But this time he couldn't ignore the tide, because the students weren't staying quiet anymore. The day after the news segment aired, something unexpected happened. During third period, a girl stood up in English class and said, "I have something to share." She didn't ask permission. She just walked to the front, took a deep breath, and read a short piece she'd written about being called freak for months because she liked insects more than makeup. When she finished, the class didn't laugh. They clapped. Not loudly, but steadily, like they were saying, "We hear you." That afternoon, two boys who'd once followed Tyler around like shadows walked into the counselor's office together. They admitted they'd been part of the problem. "We didn't think it was a big deal," one said, eyes on the floor. But seeing it written down, it felt different. Even the football coach called a team meeting. He didn't mention Tyler by name, but he made it clear. "If you can't treat people with respect, you don't wear this jersey." Tyler sat in the back, arms crossed, face unreadable. Meanwhile, the boy kept writing. He posted about the girl who stood up in class. He wrote about the two boys who apologized. He shared how the art teacher started a kindness wall where students could leave anonymous notes of encouragement. These weren't grand victories, they were small human moments. But together they added up to something real. Then came the town hall. The school board scheduled it for a Thursday evening in the gymnasium. Flyers went up all over town. The local paper ran a story. "Community gathers to address bullying crisis." The boy didn't plan to speak. He thought he'd just sit in the back with his mom and listen. But when the night came, the gym was packed. Parents, students, teachers, even a few reporters with notepads and cameras. The principal stood at the mic first, giving a careful, polished speech about school values and zero tolerance. It sounded good, but it felt empty. Then a counselor spoke about the need for better training. A parent talked about her son's anxiety. A teacher shared how she'd missed the signs in her own classroom. One by one, people stood up. And then, halfway through, the principal looked out at the crowd and said, "We also invited a student who's been part of this conversation online. He's asked to remain anonymous, but he's agreed to share a few words." All eyes turned toward the back. The boy's stomach dropped. He hadn't agreed to this, but his mom squeezed his hand and whispered, "You don't have to. But if you do, they need to hear it." He took a breath, stood up. He didn't walk to the mic right away. He just stood there for a second, heart pounding, feeling every pair of eyes on him. Then he walked slowly down the center aisle, hands in his pockets, shoulders squared. When he reached the microphone, he didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the floor, then at the wall behind the stage, anywhere but their faces. "I didn't start the blog to get attention," he began, voice quiet but clear. I started it because I was tired of pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. He paused, swallowed. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just wanted to walk to class without fear. I wanted to eat lunch without looking over my shoulder. I wanted to answer a question in class without someone laughing at how I said it. A few people nodded. Someone sniffled. For a long time, I thought if I just stayed quiet, it would stop. But silence doesn't stop bullies. It just lets them keep going. And it makes the people they hurt feel like it's their fault. He looked up then, not at Tyler's parents, who sat stiffly in the third row, but at the students scattered through the bleachers. But when I started writing, when other people started sharing their stories, I realized I wasn't alone, and maybe none of us are. He didn't say Tyler's name. He didn't accuse. He just told the truth, calm, honest, and full of heart. When he stepped away from the mic, the room was silent for a beat. Then someone clapped. Then another. Soon the whole gym was applauding, not wildly, but with a kind of respect that felt heavier than cheers. Afterward, people came up to him. Not to take selfies or ask for quotes, but to say thank you. A little girl, maybe 10 years old, tugged her mom's hand and whispered, "Can I tell him I liked what he said?" Her mom nodded, and the girl shyly handed him a folded drawing of a boy standing tall under a bright sun. On the back she'd written, "You're brave." He tucked it into his pocket right next to the note from the library. That night, as he lay in bed, his phone buzzed. A new message on the blog. It was from someone using a school email, masked but clearly from Ridgewood High. I used to laugh when Tyler picked on people. I thought it was funny. I didn't get it. But after reading your posts, I feel sick. I'm sorry. I'll do better. The boy read it 3 times. Then he replied with just 2 words. Thank you. He didn't know if it was enough, but it was a start. The next week, things shifted again. Tyler returned to school, but everything about him was different. He didn't wear his Letterman jacket. He kept to himself. When he passed the boy in the hallway, he didn't glare or mutter. He just looked away quickly, like he couldn't bear to meet his eyes. More surprising was what happened at lunch. The boy was sitting with the small group from the Seen and Heard meetings, 5 or 6 students now, eating and talking quietly when Tyler walked by alone, tray in hand. He paused near their table, hesitated, then kept walking to an empty corner. But the next day, he didn't sit alone. He sat with a kid no one ever talked to, the quiet boy who always wore mismatched socks and carried a sketchbook everywhere. They didn't talk much, but they sat together, and no one made fun of them for it. No one knew if it was guilt, loneliness, or real change. But it was something. Meanwhile, the school announced new policies, mandatory anti-bullying workshops for all students, a confidential reporting system, and a student-led peer support team. The boy was asked to help design it. He said yes, but only if other students were involved too. This isn't my thing, he told the counselor. It's ours. He started meeting with teachers after school, helping draft guidelines that actually made sense, like teaching students how to be upstanders, not just bystanders. He suggested role-playing scenarios, not lectures. He pushed for restorative conversations instead of just suspensions. Some adults resisted. Kids won't take it seriously, one said. They already are, the boy replied, and he was right. Within weeks, students were reporting incidents, not to get people in trouble, but to stop harm before it spread. A rumor about a classmate's family? Shut down before lunch? A shove in the hallway? Reported within minutes. The culture was changing, not because of rules, but because kids were choosing to care. One afternoon, the boy stayed late to help set up for the next Seen and Heard meeting. As he was taping a new sign to the door, Mr. Ellis walked by. You know, he said, leaning against the frame. Most people think courage is loud, screaming, fighting, standing on a stage. But real courage? It's showing up when you're scared. It's speaking when you've been told to stay quiet. It's believing things can be better, even when they've been broken for a long time. The boy smiled faintly. I'm still scared sometimes. Good, Mr. Ellis said. That means you're paying attention. That weekend, the boy's mom took him out for ice cream, just the 2 of them, like they used to do back in Atlanta. They sat on a bench outside the shop, watching kids ride bikes and dogs chase squirrels. You've changed, she said softly, licking her cone. He looked at her. How? You carry yourself differently, she said. Like you belong here. Like you always did, he thought about that. Maybe she was right. He didn't feel like the same person who'd walked into Ridgewood High 3 months ago, head down, shoulders hunched, trying to disappear. He still liked quiet corners and good books, but now he also liked speaking up. He liked knowing his words could help someone else feel less alone. Back at school on Monday, something small but powerful happened. During passing period, a freshman dropped his books in the hallway. A group of older kids nearby started laughing, but before the laughter could grow, a senior, the same one who'd once followed Tyler like a shadow, stepped forward, helped the kid pick up his books, and said, "Happens to everyone, man." No one clapped. No one filmed it. But the boy saw it, and he knew. This was what it looked like when a school healed, not all at once, but one kind act at a time. That night, he updated the blog again. This time, he didn't write about pain. He wrote about hope, about the girl who finally raised her hand in math, about the lunch table that now had 8 chairs instead of 1, about the note he found slipped under his locker that said, "Because of you, I told my mom what was happening. She's getting me help. Thank you." He ended with this. Change doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it's a whisper, a hand reaching out, a seat saved at lunch. But if enough of us choose kindness, even when it's hard, it adds up. And one day, you look around and realize the world feels a little safer, not because the bullies disappeared, but because we stopped letting them decide what kind of place this is. He hit publish and closed his laptop. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. His mom called from the kitchen. "You hungry?" "Yeah," he called back. "Starving." He got up, stretched, and walked toward the smell of garlic and simmering tomatoes, toward home, toward safety, toward a future he was helping build, one honest word at a time. The town hall meeting had been powerful, but real change didn't happen in one night. It happened in the weeks that followed, slowly, unevenly, sometimes painfully, but it happened. The school board, under pressure from parents, local news coverage, and even the state education department, launched a formal investigation into the pattern of bullying at Ridgewood High. They hired an outside consultant, reviewed old disciplinary records, and interviewed students one by one in quiet rooms with closed doors. For the first time, Tyler wasn't just the football star with a temper. He was a name on a list of repeated incidents, shoving, name-calling, threats, property damage. And this time there was proof. Not just one blurry video, but a trail, witness statements, dated blog posts that matched student accounts, even messages from kids who'd been too scared to speak up before but now felt safe enough to share. His parents fought back hard. They hired a lawyer. They showed up at every meeting with folders full of character references, from coaches, from neighbors, even from a youth pastor who'd known Tyler since he was in elementary school. "He's a good kid," his father insisted during one closed session. "He made a mistake. He's under a lot of pressure." But the evidence kept stacking up, and the more people talked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern, a habit, a way of moving through the world that assumed consequences wouldn't stick. The school had no choice. Tyler was suspended for 3 weeks, not just from classes, but from all school activities, including football. His name was removed from the team roster on the school website. The captain's patch was taken off his jersey. For someone who'd built his entire identity on being the big man on campus, it was like being erased. At first, he disappeared completely. No one saw him at the mall, the park, or even the gas station where he used to hang out with friends. Rumor had it he was spending most days at home, grounded, with his phone privileges cut. His so-called friends? They moved on fast. One joined the new peer support group. Another started eating lunch with a different crowd, kids he'd once mocked for being nerds. It turned out loyalty only lasted as long as the power did. Meanwhile, the boy kept his head down, not out of fear anymore, but focus. He was helping design the new student-led mediation program the school had promised. He met with counselors twice a week, sketched out session outlines, and even practiced role-playing tough conversations with Mr. Ellis after school. He didn't want this to be another empty school initiative that faded by winter break. He wanted it to last. One afternoon, as he was leaving the counseling office, he ran into the vice principal. "You've got a visitor," she said, nodding toward the front office. He frowned. Who? Says he's your uncle. He didn't have an uncle in town. But when he walked in, he saw a man in a crisp suit sitting on a plastic chair, briefcase at his feet. The man stood when he entered. "I'm Mr. Briggs's attorney," he said, extending a hand. The boy didn't take it. "I'm here on behalf of my client," the man continued, voice smooth but firm. "He'd like to extend an olive branch." The boy crossed his arms. "What does that mean?" "It means," the lawyer said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening, "that Tyler regrets how things escalated. He understands now that his actions caused real harm, and he'd like to make things right, without dragging this through the courts." The boy stayed quiet. The lawyer leaned in slightly. "Look, no one's saying your blog wasn't impactful, but words can be twisted. Accusations can stick even when they're not fully true. My client is willing to issue a public apology, participate in counseling, and support the new peer program, if you agree to take down the posts that mention him directly." The boy blinked. "You want me to erase what happened?" "I'm asking you to consider healing over punishment," the lawyer said gently. "Tyler's future is on the line. College recruiters are already backing out. One mistake shouldn't define him forever." The boy thought about that. He thought about the split lip, the fear walking home, the nights he couldn't sleep because he kept replaying the shove against the car. But he also thought about the note Tyler's little sister had slipped into his locker last week. Just a drawing of two stick figures shaking hands and the words, "My brother says sorry." He didn't owe Tyler forgiveness, but maybe he owed himself peace. "I won't take the posts down," he said finally. "They're not just about him. They're about everyone who's been hurt and told to stay quiet. But I'll agree to meet with him, if it's part of the school's restorative process. Not because of you, because I think it might help." The lawyer looked surprised. Then he nodded slowly. "That's fair." A week later, the meeting happened, not in a courtroom, not in the principal's office, but in a small conference room with a counselor, a student mediator, one of the kids from the Seen and Heard group, and both of them sitting at opposite ends of a long table. Tyler looked different. His hair was shorter. His shoulders slumped. He didn't wear his usual swagger like a coat. He just looked tired. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said after a long silence. His voice was quieter than the boy had ever heard it. "I thought being tough meant putting people down. I thought if I acted like I didn't care, no one could hurt me. But I was wrong." He didn't say "I'm sorry" right away. He talked about his dad's expectations, the pressure to be perfect on the field, the way he'd seen older guys in his neighborhood treat people like they were nothing, and how he'd copied it without thinking. "I didn't see you as a person," he admitted, eyes on the table. "I saw you as easy, quiet, someone who wouldn't fight back, and that made me feel strong. But it didn't, it just made me small." The boy listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't nod or shake his head. He just let the words hang in the air. When Tyler finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I know sorry doesn't fix your lip, or the fear, or the nights you couldn't sleep. But I mean it. And I'll do whatever the school asks, counseling, community service, whatever, to prove I'm trying to be better." The boy took a breath. "I don't need you to prove anything to me," he said. "But if you really mean it, don't just do it for me. Do it for the next kid you see getting picked on. Stand up for them. Even if it's hard, even if your friends laugh." Tyler nodded. "I will." It wasn't a movie ending. There were no hugs, no dramatic handshake. But something shifted in the room, a weight lifting just a little. Afterward, the counselor asked the boy how he felt. "Relieved," he said. "Not because he apologized, but because I didn't let him scare me into silence. And I didn't let anger turn me into him." That night he updated the blog again, but this time he didn't write about Tyler. He wrote about accountability, about how real change isn't about revenge but responsibility, about how people can hurt you deeply and still be capable of growth, if they choose to do the work. The post went viral in a different way. Not because of drama, but because of hope. Teachers shared it in staff meetings. Counselors printed it for student workshops. One youth group even used it as a discussion starter. What does it mean to hold someone accountable without destroying them? Back at school, Tyler returned after his suspension. He didn't get his old seat at the popular table. He didn't strut down the hallways like he owned them. But he showed up. He attended the mandatory counseling sessions. He signed up for the peer mediation training. Even though half the students in the room had been on the receiving end of his cruelty, no one trusted him right away. But they watched, and slowly they saw him try. He held the door for a freshman carrying too many books. He sat with the quiet kid who drew in his sketchbook. Every day, he even apologized, quietly, to the girl he'd once mocked for stuttering. She didn't forgive him on the spot, but she said thank you and kept walking. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Meanwhile, the boy's life kept moving forward. He aced his midterms. He helped organize a school-wide kindness week with posters, anonymous compliment cards, and a lunchtime open mic where students could share poems, songs, or just words of encouragement. Attendance doubled from the first Seen and Heard meeting. One afternoon, as he was taping up a poster near the science wing, a teacher stopped him. "You know," she said, smiling, "you've changed this place more than any policy ever could." He shook his head. "I didn't do it alone." "No," she agreed, "but you started the spark." He went home that night feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard. His mom made his favorite, chicken and rice with extra garlic, and they ate at the kitchen table, talking about nothing important. A funny thing the neighbor's dog did. A song on the radio whether he wanted new sneakers for spring. For a while, they just sat in comfortable silence. Then she said, "You seem lighter." He looked up. "I am." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you. Not just for standing up, but for staying kind while you did it." He smiled. "Thanks, Mom." Later, as he brushed his teeth before bed, he caught his reflection in the mirror. The scar on his lip was almost gone. Just a faint line now, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. He touched it gently. It wasn't a mark of shame anymore. It was a reminder of how far he'd come, of the day he chose to speak instead of hide, of the truth that one quiet voice can start a chorus. The next morning, he walked into school like he belonged because he did. Not because he'd won a fight, but because he'd helped build something better. And that, he realized, was the real victory. Graduation day dawned bright and warm, the kind of June morning that smells like cut grass and possibility. The boy stood in front of his closet, smoothing the wrinkles from his cap and gown. It still felt strange to think of himself as a graduate, someone who'd made it through not just academically, but emotionally, socially, even spiritually. He hadn't just survived high school. He'd helped reshape it. His mom stood in the doorway holding a small box. "I almost forgot," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She opened it. Inside was a silver pin, a simple circle with a tiny open eye in the center. "Your grandfather gave this to me when I graduated college. He said it meant stay awake, stay aware, stay kind. I think it's yours now." He took it carefully, the metal cool against his palm. He pinned it to the inside of his gown, near his heart. Not for show, just for him. The ceremony was held on the football field, the same field where Tyler had once strutted as team captain, cheered by crowds who never saw what happened off the field. Now the stands were filled with families holding balloons and handmade signs, cameras ready, tissues in hand. When his name was called, just his first initial and last name, like all the others, he walked across the stage with his head high, not out of pride, but peace. He shook the principal's hand, accepted his diploma, and gave his mom a small wave from the stage. She was crying, of course, but she was smiling too. Later, at the small gathering they held in their backyard, just close family and a few friends from school, he didn't talk much about the past. He laughed with his cousin over burnt hot dogs, helped his little nephew chase fireflies as dusk fell, and listened as his mom told stories about his childhood that made everyone groan and laugh. But when it was time for him to say a few words, he stood quietly holding a soda can someone had handed him. "I didn't plan to speak," he began, voice calm in the soft evening light. "But I've been thinking a lot about what this day means. It's not just about grades or awards or getting into college. It's about who we became while we were here." He paused, looking around at the faces, some familiar, some new, all kind. "I came to Ridgewood feeling invisible, like I had to shrink myself to fit in. But somewhere along the way I learned that my voice mattered. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. And I learned that I wasn't alone. that so many of us were carrying quiet pain, thinking we had to bear it by ourselves. He didn't mention Tyler by name. He didn't need to. What I hope we take from these years, he continued, isn't just memories of football games or prom or even the stress of finals. I hope we take the courage to speak up when something's wrong, the humility to admit when we've hurt someone, and the belief that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we can choose, especially when it's hard. A few people nodded. Someone whispered, "That's right," he smiled. "So here's to us, not just for finishing, but for growing, and for never forgetting that one person's truth can light the way for others." Afterward, an older woman, his mom's friend from work, pulled him aside. "You should be a speaker," she said. "Or a writer. Or a teacher." He just shook his head. "I think I'll study law." She raised her eyebrows. "Law?" "Yeah," he said. "Civil rights. I want to help make sure kids don't have to go through what I did, not just in schools, but everywhere." She looked at him for a long moment, then squeezed his arm. "Then the world's going to be better for it." Over the summer, he packed up his room, sorted through notebooks and old projects, and donated most of his school clothes to a local shelter. But he kept a few things. The drawing from the little girl at the town hall, the note that said, "You're not alone either," and the silver pin his mom had given him. He also kept the blog. He didn't post as often, but he kept it live. Other students had started contributing, writing about college anxiety, first jobs, staying connected to their values in new places. It had become a living archive, not just of pain, but of healing. One afternoon in August, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just his name and street. Inside was a plain white card. On it, in careful handwriting, were just a few lines. "I was wrong. I'm trying to be better. Thank you for not giving up on people like me." No signature. But he knew he didn't reply. He didn't need to. But he tucked the card into the back of his journal, not as a trophy, not as proof he'd won, but as a reminder that change is possible, even in the hardest hearts if someone refuses to stop believing in it. That fall, he moved into a small dorm at a state university 2 hours away. His roommate was a quiet guy from a farm town who loved astronomy and played guitar badly but with great enthusiasm. On their first night, the roommate asked, "So what's your story?" The boy thought for a moment. "I used to think I had to be small to be safe," he said simply. "Now I know I have to be true to be free." His roommate nodded like that made perfect sense. In his first semester, he joined a campus group that mentored local high school students. He didn't lead right away. He listened. He showed up. He remembered what it felt like to be the kid in the back, hoping someone would notice. Years passed. He graduated college with honors. He got into law school. He interned with a nonprofit that fought for student rights and equitable school discipline policies. He spoke at conferences not as a victim but as an advocate. He never made his story about revenge. He made it about responsibility, community, and the quiet power of refusing to stay silent. One spring, he returned to Ridgewood High, not as a student, but as a guest speaker for their annual Courage and Compassion Assembly. The school looked different. There were murals on the walls painted by students, scenes of hands reaching, books opening, diverse faces smiling. The Seen and Heard Club was still going strong, now run by a new generation of students. After his talk, a group of kids surrounded him with questions. "How did you not give up?" One asked, "What if no one believes you?" Another wondered. He smiled. "You don't need everyone to believe you," he said. "You just need one person, and sometimes that one person is you." As he walked out of the building that afternoon, he passed the bike racks, the same spot where everything had changed. A group of freshmen were laughing, sharing earbuds, leaning against the fence. No one was alone. No one looked afraid. He didn't stop. He just kept walking, the sun warm on his shoulders. Years later, when he stood in a courtroom arguing for fair treatment of a student suspended for defending himself, or when he drafted policy recommendations for school districts across the state, he carried those moments with him, the fear, the silence, the first shaky words on a blank screen, the hand of a little girl offering a drawing. He never forgot. But he didn't live in the past either. He built from it, and that, more than anything, was his legacy. Not that he'd been targeted, but that he'd chosen to respond with truth, not bitterness. With action, not anger. With hope, not hatred. One evening, long after he'd become a respected attorney, he sat on his apartment balcony, sipping tea and watching the city lights flicker on. His phone buzzed, a message from a former classmate. "Saw your interview on the news today. You made me proud also. Tyler's doing okay. He's a mechanic now. Has a kid. Volunteers at the youth center sometimes. I think he really did change." He read it twice. Then he typed back, "Good. Everyone deserves a chance to grow." He set the phone down and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, another quiet kid was walking home with his head down, wondering if anyone saw him, and somewhere else another student was typing the first sentence of a blog post, heart pounding, fingers trembling, choosing to speak. And because of what started in one hallway in one school, in one scared but stubborn heart, that kid wouldn't be alone for long. The boy, now a man, smiled to himself, took a slow breath, and went back inside. There was work to do tomorrow, and he was ready.